slide, sir. Okay. Okay. So the topic is regarding the BRCA testing in and the implication in cancer. And I'll be moving on to the presentation. So what would be my discussion outline? It would be what are the BRCA genes? Then what is the rationale of BRCA testing? What should be, when should we do a BRCA testing basically? How's the BRCA testing done? What is the ideal technology? And we always talk about germline BRCA testing, but there is an upcoming role of somatic BRCA testing, and when should we order it? How to interpret the test reports, because the report is quite complicated and there are some terminologies which are used, which makes the clinician sometimes confused. What is the importance of genetic counseling in BRCA testing, and how to select a BRCA testing laboratory? So first of all, what are the BRCA genes? And to be very simplified, they are basically tumor suppressor genes. They are in vogue because of Angelina Jolie. We all know about BRCA and BRCA1 and BRCA2. They are basically tumor suppressor genes. So what do? If they are normal, they suppress the occurrence of a tumor by causing DNA repair, cell cycle arrest, cell death, if there is something instability. But once there is a mutation in any one of those genes, then these mechanisms of tumor arrest do not occur. And in that situation, a patient might develop a tumor. So this is basically a BRCA. Now, if you talk about BRCA, it is a long gene which can have many mutations in exon, introns, and large insertions and deletions up to 10%. There are no hotspots. So whereas BRCA1, it is located on chromosome 17, while the BRCA2 is located on chromosome 13. So I just move on to what are the actual indications, when should we get a BRCA testing done? So if you talk about breast cancer, if you have a young age of onset, less than 45-year-old, then that is a criteria to go and ask your patient to do a BRCA testing. Secondly, if in a single patient, the patient has a family history of breast and an ovarian cancer. If the patient is less than 60-year-old but has a triple negative histology, and then some specific ethnicity, like as you all know that in the Jews population. So if we talk about breast cancer, 4 major indications. One is obviously the ethnicity we know. If less than 45 years of age, then we consider it as a young breast cancer. If there is a history of a family history of a breast or an ovarian cancer in the family, and secondly, if there is a triple negative breast cancer. So what is the importance? Now, if we see the incidence of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, and pancreatic cancer in the general population, it is only in the range of 0.5, 1 to 10%, depending on which malignancy are you talking about. But the moment you have a BRCA mutation, you see the incidence of malignancy and how it rises. The incidence in general population, for example, in the breast cancer is 12%. However, it goes to 50 to 80% or 40 to 70% if you have a BRCA mutation. Then you can have secondary primary breast cancer. The incidence of ovarian cancer from 1 to 2% general population immediately goes up to 24 to 40% or about 11 to 20% in a BRCA2. Then even the incidence of male breast cancer increases. Look at the incidence of prostate cancer. Normally, a very common malignancy, 15-18%, but about 30 or 40% when you have a BRCA mutation. And similarly is the case of pancreatic malignancy. So 2 things to be noted over here. The malignancies which are being implicated by BRCA, which is breast, ovary, male breast, prostate, and pancreas, and the amount of incidence, it is increasing the moment the mutation is present. Secondly is the lifetime risk. Now, what is a lifetime risk for developing a malignancy? So we know that for any lady, there is some baseline risk of developing a breast or an ovarian malignancy, which ranges from 1 to 10%. However, the moment you have a BRCA1 mutation, the incidence is about 65%, 45% is BRCA2. 40% in case of ovarian malignancy, and 11% if BRCA2. So here the incidence immediately increases. The lifetime risk, not incidence, the lifetime risk increases the moment the patient has a BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation. So why is this important? Is that it is not only for the person who is implicated as having a malignancy, but all those family related members who might be harboring this mutation are at increased risk, and they require a specific screening protocol for the same. So in a nutshell, as of till now, what we know is that BRCA genes are tumor suppressant genes. There are deleterious mutations in BRCA1 and 2 that can cause cells to become abnormal and grow in an uncontrolled way. The mutation in BRCA genes could increase a woman's risk of both breast and ovarian cancer. So we all are aware of the stardom and the star effect. So this was basically how it came into vogue, the Angelina effect. We all know that Angelina suffered from BRCA mutation, and she decided to undergo a mastectomy. The moment these publications were published, there was an increased patient inquiry for BRCA-related cancers. There was an increase in the referral for testing, increased self-funded BRCA testing, and it was noted a 64% increase in the BRCA testing rates occurred in the 15 business days after the editorial was published. So this was published in Times Magazine. An increased option for bilateral mastectomies as prevention in both carriers and non-carriers were also sought. So this was how that it came into vogue. So this was the star effect of Angelina Jolie, which really brought BRCA into forefront. So what is the value of BRCA testing in ovarian cancer, and when do you advise BRCA testing and how often? And secondly, how do you test it? Do you do it by blood or a tumor tissue? And how do you interpret the report? Whether you get sometimes a report known as variant of unknown significance, then what is the significance of that? These are some of the things I'm going to discuss in the subsequent slides. Secondly, how does the treatment plan change in accordance with the positive mutation report? So the three implications or the rationale for BRCA testing are: the treatment might change somehow, it helps in knowing the prognosis, and also very importantly, it identifies the unaffected carriers. So we can know that they are at increased risk of malignancy, and we can, make a screening protocol for the same. So now one is, I would like to go into some studies which have been published, and this was the Olympiad trial, which was basically in BRCA mutated metastatic breast cancer. The subset was either triple negative or hormone positive, but it had to be HER2/neu negative. Now, these patients who were BRCA mutated were randomized to either olaparib or some chemotherapy of choice of the physician, and a blinded independent central review was done. So what was the result? It showed a statistically significant improvement in BIR assessed PFS, which a median PFS of 7 months as compared to 4.2 months. Hence, in these BRCA mutated patients, this olaparib was working much better to any of the chemotherapy regimens which was being given. Treatment in olaparib increased the PFS2 also. So the benefit did not only continue till the time this drug was being given, it continued the subsequent progression-free survival also, and the overall survival data are still immature. But how this is really important is this is the implication regarding the treatment. So once you know that the patient has a BRCA mutation, then in this setting you have a drug option which is superior to the other sorts of chemotherapy being used. So this Olympiad trial was in a metastatic breast cancer setting. Subsequently, one of the trials was done, which was basically done in ovarian or high-grade endometrial setting, which was platinum sensitive. It was basically a clinical CR/PR following completion of last platinum-based chemotherapy. So this was sort of a maintenance trial, as the SOLO2 trial. You had given 4 cycles of therapy, the patient has achieved a CR or a PR. Now, subsequently, what do you want to do? If you have a patient who has a BRCA mutation positive, in that case scenario, you randomize, the patient can receive either olaparib or placebo. Then again, the endpoint was PFS, PFS2, and OS. And you can see here the graphs. the graphs are excellently in the favor of the olaparib arm. That means that the patient who were put on olaparib maintenance did much better here as compared to the patient who had been on placebo. So this is again something which changes the treatment paradigm. So we had two trials, one in the metastatic breast cancer setting and the other in the maintenance setting of an ovarian cancer, to show that how these BRCA mutations impact the treatment. Now, again, what is the association between BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutation and the survival? We can here see, as compared to the non-carriers, the BRCA1 and BRCA2 subsequently do better if they have, if the mutation is identified and they are treated with those specific drugs. Again, here we can see to identify the unaffected relatives who have harbor a breast cancer BRCA mutation. So here is basically a 10-year risk of a second primary contralateral breast cancer after a first primary invasive breast cancer, and it can be seen that these incidences are much higher in a BRCA1 or BRCA2 patient. So even if the patient has been cured of the disease of what the patient presented with, the patient harbors a risk of second primary breast cancer or an ovarian cancer, and hence these patients are put under a strict screening protocol. And this is again an implication why we should do a BRCA testing. So first implication, obviously the management part, which I told you about, two trials. Secondly, it helps us know that these patients might be having a higher chance of developing a second malignancy. Now the third part, and that is to identify the unrelated relatives who harbor a BRCA mutation. So the estimated average cumulative risk of ovarian cancer by age 70 in BRCA carriers. So in a general female population, it is only 1.3%. However, if the patient, if you have an unaffected relative, but that patient is harboring, that person is harboring a BRCA1 mutation, that person has a 40% chance of having a malignancy by the age of 70, and if having a BRCA2 has an 11% of chance. So it is very important to then screen for your other unaffected relatives as well. So when should BRCA testing be done? I have already told you regarding the breast malignancy, and these are the guidelines. These are the guidelines as per the ESMO, the NCCN, the ASCO, and the SGO. So what does the ESMO say? It says that patients with high-grade tumors should be tested for a germline BRCA mutation. Consideration should be given for testing tumors for a somatic BRCA mutation. So I'll be talking about the somatic BRCA mutation in my subsequent slides. The NCCN panel recommends testing for patients with a personal history of ovarian cancer diagnosed at any age. So any patient coming with a history of ovarian cancer at any age should be subjected to a BRCA testing as per NCCN. The ASCO says genetic counseling and testing should be considered even in the absence of family history for epithelial ovarian fallopian tube or PPC. So even if the patient is not having any family history, but having a female genital tract tumor in the form of ovarian epithelial or fallopian tube or a PPC, then the patient should be subjected to BRCA testing. And SGO says that BRCA testing for all patients with epithelial, ovarian, tubal, and peritoneal cancers, even in the absence of family history. So we have two specific indications of a BRCA testing here, where I had already talked about the breast cancer. Now these are the guidelines for testing in ovarian cancer. So now if we talk about how does it really, how does the flowchart goes for an ovarian cancer patient? So ideally, the patient, as per the latest guidelines, the moment the ovarian cancer is diagnosed, the patient should undergo a reference for BRCA testing. And mind you, the reference for BRCA testing is not a simple procedure. A genetic counseling needs to be done with a written informed consent obtained, because it has implications for the patient, the patient's family, the unaffected carriers, as well as the insurance purposes. So for the treatment paradigm, the patient would receive a first-line chemotherapy. Now, if the patient relapses and has a second-line chemotherapy, then after achieving some sort of response, a PARP maintenance therapy is possible if the patient has germline BRCA2 mutation or a somatic BRCA2 mutation. Now, what is the role of germline BRCA versus somatic BRCA? I'm going to discuss in my subsequent slides. So here it is clear that we should order a BRCA testing the moment a diagnosis of ovarian cancer is made. So again, coming on to just to revise the facts of breast cancer, any for less than 45 years age breast cancer, we go for a BRCA testing. If less than 50 years, then we check the family history criteria or the additional breast cancer primary, that breast ovarian, which I talked about. If less than 60 years of age, then triple negative phenotype, and any age, if the ethnicity supports such or there is a family history criteria, then any age we should test for BRCA testing. So these are the two major indications of BRCA testing. Now comes the question of how is the BRCA testing done and what is the ideal technology? Because a lot of question would be raised that you will have multiple options whenever you opt for a BRCA testing, where to order, what not to order. So typically we had something like a Sanger sequencing, which is a gold standard, high accuracy, but a limited throughput and a higher cost. So here the role comes of next generation sequencing, which basically has a high throughput and a lower cost. So the best modality and the one which is being followed these days is the NGS, which is the next generation sequencing. So what is next generation sequencing? It is often called massive parallel sequencing, and it is a slightly complicated process. Although different NGS methods vary in the details, NGS is based on the production of sequence from single DNA molecules in parallel and their comparison to a reference sequence. So once you replicate a single DNA molecule and you compare it to a reference sequence, then you come to know that whether there is some difference in the two or not. This parallel sequencing of DNA templates results in sequencing of a large portion of the genome for mutations, rearrangements, and copy number aberrations. And generally, the method involves creating a library, amplifying target sequences, and detecting the sequences via DNA chip. The sequences reads are analyzed by bioinformatics personnel. So these are basically the methods we are using. And in NGS, the Illumina platform is the one which is being used. And now you have the multiplex ligation probe dependent amplification. I'm not going into the details of any of these. So how do you do that? So for a germline BRCA mutation, you take a blood sample of a patient, you extract the DNA from the normal cells, and a blood sample can be tested to determine the germline BRCA status of the patient. So DNA is extracted from the sample, and then the BRCA genes are sequenced and compared to a reference genome to identify any variation. So you take a blood sample, you identify the BRCA genes, they are sequenced, and then they are compared to a reference genome to identify whether there is any variation in the same. So the incorporation of next generation sequencing workflow into BRCA testing is allowed for development of a faster process with higher throughput and a lower cost, as I've already told you, because then you have a DNA extraction and everything, it goes on fast. So not going again into the details of the same. The question here comes is the role of the somatic testing in ovarian cancer and breast cancer. So of late, many of my patients have come and have been asking the lab, even the Lal lab, for getting me a somatic testing. So I'll tell you why. What is the importance of somatic testing in BRCA mutation? So when you have a germline BRCA mutation, it is an inherited mutation. So it is found in all the body cells. So you can do a blood sample or a buccal mucosa swab and you will identify it. However, if you have acquired that mutation, it is not a germline mutation, then it is present in those specific somatic cells. Then the somatic BRCA mutations can be detected only in a tumor sample, like a fresh frozen plasma sample, the FFP sample, the frozen samples. So for a germline, the mutation is present throughout the body. So you can take any sample. But somatic, it can only be affected in that specific population of cells in which the body has acquired it. It might not be present throughout the body. So if we talk about the implication of the same, and we see that approximately 15% of ovarian cancer patients, a germline BRCA mutation, they can have a germline BRCA mutation, while an additional 5 to 7, which is a huge number because it is about 50% of the same, may have a somatic BRCA mutation. So if you do a germline BRCA mutation testing, you might miss those 5 to 7% patients who have a somatic BRCA mutation testing. So this is the importance of checking for somatic BRCA mutation, because the drugs and the therapeutic implications would carry similar if the patient has a somatic BRCA mutation also. So approximately 40% of the patients with BRCA mutation ovarian cancer have no relevant family history because they have a somatic BRCA mutation, not a germline BRCA mutation. So this is a very important slide to basically show you the difference between a somatic and a germline BRCA mutation. A patient is there who has an ovarian cancer who is found to be BRCA wild type on blood testing, would need a subsequent tumor test to establish whether or not she has a somatic BRCA mutation. Why? Because the germline BRCA mutation would be present in every cell. So if the germline test is done and the germline test is negative, still you do not know if the patient has acquired mutation later on. So to find out the therapeutic implication, you will have to test the tumor. However, if you test the tumor first and the tumor test is negative, which is somatic, then you are sure that the patient is not harboring any sort of mutation, whether it is germline or somatic. However, if the patient's tumor test turns out to be positive, in that case scenario, you might do a germline testing to know the implications of whether any family history is of relevance or not. So I think I made this point clear. You do a germline test. If it is negative, you are not sure whether the mutation is still present or not in the tissue. However, if the mutation is present in the tissue, then you can test subsequently for germline to come to know whether it is basically a germline infected or it has been acquired. But the therapeutic implication would be there. Again, I talked about the ovarian cancer. Again, the study concluded that across a large unselected breast cancer, 11% of individuals were BRCA mutation positive. So, two-thirds amongst those, two-thirds were BRCA mutation were germline, while one-third were somatic. About 50%, again, the number is nearly similar. It was similar, two-thirds in ovarian and one-third for somatic. And similarly in breast cancer, it is two-thirds germline and one-third somatic. So this was one of the trials which was done by MD Anderson, and in which they basically did a tumor testing where they found that BRCA mutation was found in about 19% of the patients, where they again did a subsequent germline testing to find that how many harbored a germline and a somatic, while some only harbored a somatic mutation. And they came out with the fact that about 60% of those were harboring a germline mutation, while about 40% of those were harboring a somatic mutation. So the number of somatic mutation, 40%, is huge. So it has a huge implication regarding the therapeutic treatment. Now comes another important part, and which is the interpretation and the clinical reporting. Now, if you see the interpretation and the clinical reporting, this is basically the 5-tier classification scheme of how to report any mutation in a BRCA. So, class 1 is not pathogenic or of no clinical significance. 2 is likely not pathogenic or of no clinical significance. 3 is uncertain. 4th is likely pathogenic, and 5th is definitely pathogenic. So what we are concerned as of now when we get a report is basically the likely pathogenic or the definitely pathogenic. And this is basically the tier classification scheme which should be followed by any lab who is testing for BRCA. These are the additional things which are required by the lab to be followed: the lab details and the accreditation number, the page number, the unambiguous ways of reporting and easy interpretation. You should not mention positive or negative, which is not recommended. The nomenclature, the 5-class systems, and recommendations for genetic counseling appropriately, and family follow-up recommendation in appropriate cases. So this is how do you get a typical report, and it is quite a complicated report. So once you see the result heterozygous for BRCA2, you sometimes get confused that what is it? It is not whether it is really clinically important or not. Then you have to read this line which says that consequently this mutation is considered pathogenic. The moment it says that the mutation is pathogenic, it means that it is important and it is now significant. So this is another terms which come in the report and which we know the meaning should be known clear to us. One is pathogenic suspected mutation. Here there's a disease associated mutation and it can be used for patients clinical management. It is the basis of predictive testing of relatives. So this is the main thing which you are looking at. The mutation is pathogenic. Another is sometimes we get a report is a genetic variant of uncertain significance. In these case scenarios, the clinical significance is unknown and there is no evidence to change the patient's clinical management or offer predictive tests to the relatives. So when you get a report of VUS, which is variant of unknown significance, uncertain significance, you need not test the relatives and you need not change your treatment management. Then you can have a genetic variant polymorphism. The variant has been confirmed as not clinically relevant and no mutation detected. You're happy that there's no BRCA mutation. It might be suggest to do outline details of extent and limits of analysis, and there might be suggestions for to do an additional test. Another thing, the genetic counseling in BRCA mutation testing. So any patient who is being tested for BRCA should not be just tested for BRCA. There's a lot of implication regarding the further treatment of the patient, the further risk of malignancy in the patient, and and also the relatives, the unaffected relatives, they are at increased risk. There might be some insurance implications as well. So a proper genetic counseling is must in a BRCA mutation testing. The implications must be told to the patient that if this turns out to be positive, then you have an increased risk of various malignancies. Your other family members might also carry a risk and the other implications as well. So the risk assessment, traditionally BRCA testing has been undertaken to assess risk for developing cancer and information consideration for preventive measures. Now you have a therapeutic implication also. And now the pre-testing genetic counseling, one has to go through a detailed pedigree, risk assessment to determine eligibility for genetic testing, familial risk stratification, and informed consent process, the patient education about benefits, harms, limitation, genetic test possible, ethical issues, and the post-test genetic counseling, which is test reporting, interpretation of results, management of option determination. So these are the mainstream and the traditional BRCA testing pathway. I'm not going into the details. Now comes the question of the selection of the BRCA testing laboratory. These are the lab specifics that the centers should have done at least 300 samples per year. Minimum of 1 year should be the period for which the testings had been taken. Under 4 weeks, STAT should be quality certified. NGS and MLPA techniques should be there along with Sanger. Pre and post test genetic counseling should be there. There should be high sensitivity in high specificity. The failure rate should be less than 1%. The VUS rate should be less than 6%, and obviously the appropriate costing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Mohit, for a wonderful session. We have few queries. The first one is it better to go for BRCA mutation or bigger gene panels for hereditary cancers?
It would really depend upon what sort of malignancy you are talking about. And what the question would be that if you are actually targeting a BRCA mutation because the family history or the risk scenario is such, then in that scenario, it is best to go for a BRCA testing only. However, if it is a patient has a family history and you want to test for other, so this question is not cannot be answered directly. You have to take the patient's clinical scenario into the situation, the family history, and everything. If the patient is fitting into a criteria where the BRCA testing is being BRCA might be implicated, then it is important to do for a BRCA testing and probably go for a homologous gene rearrangement testing as well.
Okay. Another question from Dr. Shaida is, what about if the patient has bilateral BRCA cancer below 50 years of age?
So any bilateral breast cancer increases the chances of the possibility of BRCA, and the BRCA testing should be done even if below the 50 years of age.
Can we highlight the impact of BRCA in DNA repair and HRR pathway? Here's another question.
BRCA and HRR pathway both are important, and for that matter, if you have a therapeutic implication regarding the same, you also need to check for the HRR pathway and homologous rearrangement. So once you do an NGS, it is not only BRCA you test for, you actually check for HRD as well. So the impact would be therapeutic in both the cases. So one should check for BRCA as well as HRD. And library preparation is very, very important during NGS testing, because the thing is that you need to actually compare your report with the library. The significance of the mutation would be much more better the moment your library is bigger. So it is actually when you compare it to the standard, and it is very important to basically get a library preparation during NGS testing.
Right. So how therapeutic plan changes if mutation comes likely pathogenic in somatic versus germline?
So again, it would be same. If you have a metastatic breast cancer, in that case scenario, you can put a patient on olaparib. If you have a patient, even in case of this ovarian cancer, you have a possibility of an olaparib maintenance. So the therapeutic plan is similar whether you have a somatic or a germline mutation. But the moment a germline mutation comes, then you know that now the patient has an increased risk. The family members might be at increased risk as well. So there comes the importance of basically the testing for other members as well.
Okay. What is the way forward to carry the test in centers where we do not have genetic counselors?
No, you need to get genetic counselors into play. It has a lot of medical legal implication. So you should not go for a testing in centers where you do not have a genetic counselor. You should go, someone from your lab should go and get yourself co-certified or some training for genetic counseling. It is very necessary to do so.
Right, that is important. So which test should be done first? Germline or somatic?
So the question is here simple. If the somatic is, if you have a germline testing done and it turns out to be negative, then a somatic test still can turn out to be positive. If you do a somatic testing and if it turns out to be negative, you know that the germline testing is also negative. So to seeing the cost benefit ratio, it is always better to go for an upfront somatic testing. If the somatic testing is negative, you are sure that the patient is not harboring any mutation. If the somatic testing is positive, then you can go for a blood test to see whether that mutation is present in the germline or not.
And after the germline is positive, then we should go in for checking our heredity kind of a thing for your parents or for your sisters, right?
Yeah.
Can male family members also get affected by BRCA1 and 2?
Can
male family members also get affected by BRCA1?
Sure. The incidence of male breast cancer increases the moment you have a BRCA test. The more incidence of pancreatic cancers, the prostate cancer increases in BRCA mutation. So the male members are also affected once you have a BRCA in the family.
For ovary or breast cancer, what are the other genetic tests?
So you have familial syndromes where you can go for other testing, which are actually, you again need to see that what sort of the risk the patient is fitting into. So there are some sort of syndromic diagnosis where you have breast ovary combinations. But, there are many, but then they should not be taken as it is. They have to be taken into the clinical context.
If the test is done from the tissue, both germline or somatic, can it be detected in the same time?
So if the test is done from the tumor tissue, you know that the mutation is there.
Yeah.
It might be germline or it might be somatic. So you cannot know that whether it is germline or somatic. Now, to classify whether it is germline or somatic, you need to do another test which might be done from blood.
Yes. If the test is in BRCA positive individuals, what can be done to reduce pancreatic cancer?
So See, there is nothing which you can actually do because you are harboring a mutation. What you can do is you can put yourself under any person who is there harboring such a mutation can put himself or herself into a stringent screening protocol, is so that if even somebody develops a pancreatic malignancy, then it should be detected at an early stage. Secondly, you might basically try to prevent, you might remove the other factors, which is smoking and alcohol, but it really won't make a difference if you're harboring a BRCA positivity. So only thing is that you can have a good screening protocol so as to identify the disease at a early stage.
So what is the significance of genes apart from BRCA1 and BRCA2? For example, TP53RB1 or in German like HBOC. And finally, is it better to opt for BRCA1 and to for this is the same question you have already answered actually.
Yeah, so the question, answer is same. See, the problem here is that when we talk about HRD, we have very limited number of labs which are testing for HRD. So the most commonly test being done and the most cost-effective test which is being done is NGS BRCA1 and 2, which costs about say 15 to 20,000 depending upon different labs and with a good standardization. However, if you talk about the exact therapeutic implications, then we need to check for HRD as well. And now, if we go for an HRD, there are only few labs which are doing those testings, and those tests are being basically outsourced to some outside the country, and the cost is very high, ranging from 1.5 to 4.5 lakhs. But if you talk about the comprehensiveness, then that is the way. That is the BRCA1 and 2 along with HRD. But however, if you talk about only with the resources available, BRCA1 and 2 should be at least be done.
Right. So the same question has been asked, that HRD directly without BRCA testing for therapeutic purpose for ovarian cancer?
Yeah, once you do an HRD, the BRCA would be done automatically. So you have to do, so it will be done automatically. So it can be obviously done with the therapeutic purpose. So once you are doing HRD, obviously the BRCA1 and 2 would be taken into consideration.
Right. Apart from breast and ovarian cancer, any other cancer where BRCA testing would be clinically significant?
So the role is coming in a lot of malignancies. There are specific case scenarios where in prostate cancer you test for BRCA, even the pancreatic cancer you are testing for BRCA. So you have different case scenarios in different age groups where if that the clinical situation is there, then you go for a BRCA testing. But the most common testing where the incidence is high and where it is really should be done is the breast and the ovarian cancer.
Right. Without genetic counseling, only by somatic testing can therapeutic decision should be taken?
So how do you know that you are only doing a somatic testing? Once you are testing for a mutation by the tumor, it can be germline as well as somatic. So the genetic counseling has to be done. But the therapeutic decision can be taken once any sort of mutation is detected. So if you have a BRCA mutation positive, then the therapeutic decision regarding the same can be taken easily. However, it is germline or not, it has to be decided further.
Okay. What is the significance of deletion duplication testing along with NGS?
So when you talk about NGS, it is not only about insertion, deletion. It might be duplication. It might be, different sorts of possibilities. That is why we are taking NGS into consideration. So when the NGS basically amplifies a single DNA sequence, it compares with the standard. And wherever a clinically relevant insertion, deletion, or duplication occurs, which can be therapeutically targeted, those are taken and told you as clinically significant variant.
Okay. So for this cost of test, we'll come to that. The other question is government set up doing these tests. There are certain, sir, if you can answer.
So I think certain hospitals must be doing it.
Yeah.
But I am not aware of the price of the government testing labs, what they are charging and where all exactly they are being done.
So method of sampling, what is gene amplification? Is it pathological? So this is one question they are asking.
Sorry?
Method of sampling. I think the sampling would be, one is tissue and the other would be the blood. Right?
So when you are testing for germline, pretty simple, just do a blood test. They'll extract the DNA, amplify the DNA sequence of the BRCA and compare it with the standard. When you are doing a somatic testing, then you need the tumor tissue. You need the frozen You need the block. They'll take the sample from there. They'll test it. They'll amplify it by NGS and compare it to the standard.
Right. One question states that any such genetic testing in NSCLC. So I think that question we can. So this question states for NLCLC.
So there is a lot of genetic variations and mutation testing being in NSCLC. Not specifically talking about BRCA, because BRCA does not really increase the incidence of NSCLC. But obviously NSCLC is one malignancy where you have maximum role of getting an NGS done to see for duplication, multiple mutations, ALK, EGFR, ROS, MET, and what else and what not.
True, sir. Thanks a lot, Dr. Mohit, for a wonderful session. We have 2 slides more wherein we will be telling about what Dr. Lal PathLabs is doing for BRCA testing. So we are doing both. Himanshi, if you can put up the slides. We are doing both the somatic as well as germline cancer. Yeah, this is the one. We are doing both mutation analysis of BRCA by NGS method, as Dr. Mohit has suggested. We are doing both pre and post genetic counseling for the same. The turnaround time is within 15 days, and the price is 25,000 for drug profiling. We are informing about the drug profiles as well. And if it is normal germline mutation, it is 22,000. Next slide. So thanks a lot, Dr. Mohit, for a wonderful presentation. I just want to introduce GeneWise, which is a new platform to share clinical case studies, webinars, and newer technologies from Dr. Lal PathLabs, the GeneEvolve test. So we request all the clinicians to share their write-ups, case studies related to genomics for publishing it on the social media like LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can all put in your queries, your questions on geneevolve@lalpathlabs.com. Next slide. These are our various partners. We are doing TumorSeq with Caris. We are sending hereditary cancers and other tests to Cellmax as well. And we are using Thermo Fisher as our building knowledge partners. That's it. Our accreditations include NABL, CAP, and ISO. So all the accreditations are there. We are doing genetic counseling. The turnaround time is also same as expected by all the doctors. So Dr. Lal PathLabs is doing a good job in oncogenetics. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks a lot, Dr. Mohit, for this presentation.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With your permission, we'll end the meeting.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir.
Participants.
Thank you, everyone.